Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a really fascinating and honestly deeply important journey into what a revolutionized, waste-free food system actually looks like. We hear a lot about broken supply chains, food poverty, climate change, but we rarely get to see a structural, start-to-finish solution that tackles all of those things at once. But that's exactly what we're going to look at today by examining the incredible work of Ample Kitchen. We're going to see how they're literally transforming the whole concept of farm to plate, taking what is usually just discarded and turning it into a real powerhouse for community health. Okay, let's dive right into this. 2 million. That is a staggering number. It represents 2 million tons of UK produce. Produce that, by the way, was perfectly intended for human consumption, that just gets wasted every single year. And here's the kicker. This waste is happening at the primary production stage. This means all of this beautiful, nutritious food is literally being thrown away, rejected, and left to rot before it ever even gets a chance to reach a plate. It's this massive area of the supply chain that is just far too often overlooked. And the environmental consequence of all that waste? Well, that brings us to our next critical number, 3.2 million. Because, those 2 million tons of rotting, unsold crops, they don't just magically disappear, they decompose. And in doing so, they emit a staggering 3.2 million tons of CO2 equivalent into our atmosphere. We're talking about massive, really dangerous methane releases that contribute directly to our global climate crisis. It's like a double tragedy, right? We've got a food scarcity problem on one end and an absolute environmental disaster caused by food surplus on the other. So how do we fix a system that's kind of failing right out of the gate? Well, that brings us to Section 1, fixing the sourcing stage at primary production. Ample Kitchen realized pretty quickly that to make a real dent in those emissions and all that waste, you can't just tinker around the edges. You actually need a structural solution right where the food is grown. And this represents a massive shift in procurement strategy. Get this, Ample aims to source a full 75% of their ingredients directly from farm surplus. 3/4 of what they cook with is food that would have otherwise just been left to rot. By stepping in and utilizing this surplus, they directly curb Scope 3 emissions. Those really tricky indirect carbon costs that hide in the supply chain. They're literally intercepting the crops before they can release that harmful methane into the air. It's just a highly strategic move for hitting net zero goals. Let's move on and see how this builds into an ethical, community-first supply chain in 3 really simple steps. Step 1. They step in and pay British farmers a fair price for crops that the traditional market simply rejects. That is real, tangible financial support for growers, and it's what true ethical sourcing looks like. Step 2. They freeze this produce immediately, and this is key. Freezing locks in that peak freshness and nutritional value, which allows them to extend the life of these crops and actually use surplus year-round. And finally, Step 3. They supply this high-quality food directly to community kitchens. They're taking what was essentially deemed worthless and turning it into an absolute lifeline. Now, to make this entire system environmentally and economically viable, a dietary shift is absolutely required. Section 2, the power of pulses and plant-rich menus. So, Ample Kitchen strongly prioritizes plant-rich menus because, frankly, relying heavily on meat and dairy just can't deliver the low-carbon footprint we need to fix the food economy. So they needed a hero ingredient. And that hero ingredient is celebrated in a brilliantly named campaign, the Bang in Some Beans initiative. Because sometimes saving the planet doesn't require a lab coat, It just requires you to, bang in some beans. But jokes aside, the science and the strategy behind it are dead serious. Ample is championing pulses and beans not just as some sad side dish, but as a brilliant, highly strategic food choice for the actual survival of our planet. Now, what's really interesting about this is when you actually compare beans to those heavily processed plant-based meat alternatives, the superiority is undeniable. First up, cost. Beans and pulses are often 4.5 times cheaper per 100 grams. That is massive for community budgets. Second, nutrition. Beans are incredibly high in fiber, which is absolutely crucial for gut health and addressing the UK's overall low fiber intake. Plus, they're just packed with iron, zinc, and potassium. And finally, the environment. Beans are natural nitrogen fixers. That means they actually support soil health and slash our reliance on synthetic fertilizers. It makes them a total cornerstone for regenerative agriculture. So let's shift our focus down to the micro-level impact here. Section 3, healthier meals, stronger communities. Because at the end of the day, all of this sustainably sourced, low-carbon food, it actually has to go onto a plate and nourish the vulnerable people who need it the most. Ample achieves this by sticking to some seriously strict nutritional mandates. We're talking zero added sugar, zero artificial additives, and absolutely no ultra-processed foods, or UPFs. This ensures their meals maintain low HFSS scores. That stands for high in fat, salt, and sugar. And why does this matter? Well, because public healthcare and education sectors have to meet incredibly strict nutritional standards anyway, and Ample is providing a highly cost-effective tool to help them do exactly that, essentially reducing the economic burden on our entire public health system. The contrast here is just stark. I mean, instead of the broken status quo, rotting, unsold crops, emitting methane, and fueling climate change, we have the Ample solution. Those exact same crops, frozen, their nutrients locked in, feeding school children, hospital patients, and care home guests. We know for a fact that improving the diets of marginalized and vulnerable individuals directly elevates their energy, it improves their mood, and it seriously aids in long-term recovery. It's literally a transformation from an environmental poison into a public health triumph. And they aren't doing this in a vacuum. Ample is actively tackling food poverty and insecurity right on the ground by working with some incredible community action partners. They're partnered up with local authorities in places like Tower Hamlets and Newham, and they work directly with Feeding Britain's affordable food clubs. By supplying these community kitchens with top-tier, nutrient-dense food, they're ensuring that the most vulnerable people in our society have reliable access to meals that genuinely support their well-being. Bringing it all together now. Section 4, a fairer food economy, a shared mission. We've traced this whole journey from the farm, where farmers are actually paid fairly for their surplus, all the way to the plates of those who need it most. And this isn't just about food, is it? It's a shared mission that makes chefs, school kids, patients, and hospital staff active participants in building a more equitable world. So the crucial point is summarized perfectly right here in their own manifesto. At Ample, we demand a more equitable food economy. We hate waste and take practical action to prevent it. And it's that second sentence that is so incredibly vital. They don't just hate waste in theory, they take practical, structural, daily action to stop the broken food cycle right in its tracks. Which leaves us with this final kind of provocative thought to mull over. Look at your own institutions, your schools, your hospitals, your workplaces, or hey, even just your own daily choices. How can your food supply become a positive force for change? Ample has shown us that the blueprint definitely exists to feed people better, pay farmers fairly, and heal the planet, all at the absolute same time. It's time we all start thinking about how we can partner with that vision. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today, and I highly encourage you to keep diving into how we can all reshape the food economy for the better. Catch you next time.